Welcome to Demystifying Iran. On Sunday, December 28, 2025, there were small protests in Tehran. The trigger was economic. The currency suddenly plummeted. Prices soared. Some shop owners in central Tehran took to the streets, their frustration plain over the falling rial and rising inflation. There was no violence, no arrests. The government stated the demands were legitimate. What we did not know then was this: the collapse was engineered. The United States had manipulated the Iranian rial through the country's neighbors. But within days, everything changed. What began as a peaceful civil protest rapidly mutated into something else entirely, something monstrous. Police stations and military bases were assaulted. Buses, ambulances, fire engines destroyed. Hundreds of our police, our Basij volunteers, our Revolutionary Guards murdered. Schools, banks, mosques, clinics, public libraries, shops, markets set ablaze. Passers-by, innocent bystanders were executed at close range. Knives, swords, pistols. Men and women were surrounded, captured, and burned alive, beaten to death, stabbed, beheaded, shot. This was not a protest. This was a meticulously orchestrated campaign of brutal violence. This was a conspiracy against Iran. And the proof came from the conspirators themselves. From Tel Aviv, Mossad issued a statement in plain Persian, taunting Iran. Mossad is on the ground with the rioters. Former U.S. Secretary of State and CIA chief Mike Pompeo tweeted and confirmed this, that Mossad agents were walking beside the terrorists on our streets. The Israeli regime's own Channel 14 laid it bare. They said that foreign regimes had flooded Iran with weapons, and that is why hundreds of our protectors were slaughtered. And Donald Trump tweeted to the rioters and armed men, "Help is on the way." When these statements are placed beside the images of targeted slaughter, it becomes clear who benefits from transforming peaceful protests into a bloodbath. Understanding this requires tracing a 47-year pattern, from the formation of militant groups trained and funded by hostile Western states, to targeted assassinations, to public blueprints for what they term soft war. The evidence reveals how Western intelligence agencies have, for decades, systematically exploited Iran's internal challenges. This is not a dismissal of legitimate grievances. It is an exposure of a deliberate strategy: create hardship, hijack protests, unleash chaos, and fracture national sovereignty from within. This is not a new playbook. We saw its softer face in the early 2000s, the so-called color revolutions. The script grew much more violent in Libya and Syria. What began as demonstrations were swiftly hijacked. Protesters were sidelined by militants. The countries were flooded with money, weapons, and foreign fighters. Libya was bombed into a failed state. Syria was plunged into a decade-long proxy war where terrorist groups became the tools for regime change. The result was not freedom, but unending catastrophe, the total destruction of a society. Now it's clear that the same framework has been established regarding Iran during the Netanyahu-Trump meeting at Mar-a-Lago over the New Year. From the engineered currency collapse to the immediate influx of trained provocateurs, to the synchronized Western media campaign, to the overt U.S. threats of attack, every piece fits. This was not spontaneous. It was a long-planned operation. The 1979 Islamic Revolution culminated in a definitive political transition. The subsequent trajectory of the Mujahedin-e-Khalq organization, or MEK, constitutes a suitable case study in the formation of a Western-backed terrorist cult. When the popular political outcome solidified into the Islamic Republic, the MEK transitioned from a minor participant to a determined adversary. This shift was not reactive, but a prepared escalation. The organization systematically raided security installations to procure weapons and arranged external arms shipments through intermediaries in Iraq. By June 1981, it had transformed from a political faction into a full-fledged paramilitary force. From early 1979, the group framed the political contest as an inevitable civil war. Its leaders' declaration that they would answer a fist with a fist and a bullet with a bullet explicitly adopted a posture of violence. That posture was formalized on June 20, 1981, with their declaration of armed insurrection. Their operational phase employed targeted political violence to decapitate the emerging state. Assassinations targeted key religious and administrative architects. Terror tactics, car bombings, and mass street killings sowed fear and chaos. The campaign's most devastating single operation was the bombing of the Islamic Republic Party headquarters on June 28, 1981, which murdered 72 senior officials, including Chief Justice Ayatollah Muhammad Beheshti, crippling parts of the state's executive core. This atrocity followed an attempted assassination of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei just one day prior. Official estimates attribute the deaths of over 17,000 Iranian civilians and state personnel to MEK operations during this period. At the height of Saddam Hussein's imposed war against Iran, the organization formalized its status as a foreign proxy by securing his patronage and relocating to Camp Ashraf in Iraq. From this forward operating base, it provided intelligence and operational support to Saddam against Iran. This established a definitive treacherous precedent, an Iranian opposition group conducting armed operations against its own nation under the direct command of a hostile aggressor at war with it. During and after the war, the US, UK, Canada, and several European nations provided the group political shelter, hosting it under various front names. They then systematically removed the MEK from their official terrorist list. These were conscious political decisions made with full knowledge of the group's extensive record of assassinations and bombings against Iranian civilians and officials.
The United States is removing the People's Mujahedin of Iran, or MEK, from its list of terrorist organizations. The group supports the overthrow of Iran's clerical leaders and fought alongside Saddam Hussein's forces in the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s.
After heavy lobbying, I think a couple of years ago, the State Department reluctantly took them off the terrorist list. But they demonstrate, they fund a lot of politicians. They give a lot of money to politicians to come speak at their events.
Nowadays, the MEK is a friend of the West. And this is very peculiar. This is very interesting because the MEK, while also committing terrorist acts inside of Iran, they were also killing Americans.
The coordinated delisting had a triple effect. It empowered the organization by removing legal barriers, whitewashed its terrorist history, and facilitated new channels for financial and logistical support. The MEK's utility evolved. By the early 2000s, it had transitioned from a paramilitary force into a key intelligence and propaganda asset for Western and Israeli agencies, specializing in targeting Iran's nuclear program. The group produced and leaked fabricated documents, including forged satellite analyses, claiming to reveal a covert military dimension to Iran's civilian nuclear activities. The IAEA would later grudgingly admit these documents were likely forged. This manufactured intelligence, symbolized by its 2002 orchestrated so-called revelation of the Natanz facility, was funneled to agencies like Mossad and the CIA, then amplified globally to build a case for sanctions and war. Throughout this process, the MEK's clear agenda as a hostile actor was systematically downplayed. Its propaganda was deliberately rebranded as credible dissident evidence. This phase marks a critical evolution. The MEK was no longer just a militant proxy. It had been reforged into an information weapon. Its new mandate? To seed the narrative, to fabricate the myth of an imminent nuclear threat, to provide the pretext, the necessary lie for decades of sanctions, for isolation, for the drumbeat of war. And this model, this playbook of leveraging forged intelligence to justify foreign intervention, did not retire. It remained active. It was perfected. It set the direct precedent for what was to come. It became the blueprint for transforming peaceful civil protests into violent confrontation in order to make the case for war. The West's strategic rehabilitation of the MEK terrorist group established a destructive precedent. An Iranian opposition group is judged not by its adherence to democratic principles or domestic legitimacy, but solely by its utility to a hostile Western agenda. Its credibility is conferred from the outside, never earned from within. This strategy of cultivating internal agents extends far beyond exiled political organizations. It also actively exploits Iran's social ethnic landscape. Western intelligence services, primarily from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and the Israeli regime, have systematically identified and armed separatist and militant groups as instruments of pressure. Among these, Kurdish separatist factions have received particular and sustained attention. Primary beneficiaries of this Western patronage is the Kurdish Free Life Party, Komale, and PAK, which are based in northern Iraq. They operate as direct proxies, receiving funding, advanced weaponry, intelligence support, and cross-border safe haven from Western agencies and their affiliated NGOs. Simultaneously, these same Western regimes grant terrorist leaders platforms on nationally and internationally broadcast Western-funded media networks. This serves a dual purpose: to internationalize their cause and to launder their image. The contradiction is stark. These are the very regimes that for decades have pretended to champion multiculturalism and tolerance. Yet in Iran, their operational objective is clear: to manufacture division, incite hostility, and fracture national cohesion along ethnic and sectarian lines. The strategic objective behind supporting these Kurdish and other separatist movements is unequivocal: to fracture Iran's territorial integrity from the periphery inward. By deliberately sustaining and escalating ethnic tensions, these external powers aim to force Iran into a perpetual security dilemma. They attempt to compel the state to divert immense military, intelligence, and economic resources to secure its borders, a constant and exhausting drain on national strength. This engineered internal fragility is synchronized with external economic warfare. While they attempt to stretch the state's resources thin by creating internal security threats, these same foreign powers deploy maximum pressure sanctions designed to cripple the economy and manufacture widespread suffering among the civilian population. The goal is a nation besieged simultaneously from within and without, its resilience systematically sapped on every front. Within this Western framework, historically unpopular political factions are systematically promoted, most notably the exiled royalist circle around Reza Pahlavi. His profound unpopularity is rooted in the brutal legacy of his grandfather and his father's regimes, which overwhelmingly Iranians associate with famine, the wholesale looting of national resources, Western subservience, and systematic state terror. Lacking any substantive political resume of his own, Pahlavi has further eroded his non-existent credibility through overt and desperate appeals to foreign powers. His widely mocked pilgrimage to Israel, where he was photographed wearing a kippah at the Wailing Wall, became a symbol of this subservience. His personal and family affairs have also been a source of public ridicule. This alignment, or more accurately, this allegiance, was not a one-time error, but a stated strategic cornerstone. At a Washington, D.C. press conference on January 16, 2026, Pahlavi explicitly cited his 2023 visit as the foundational step towards his current policy, a pledge to recognize the Israeli regime immediately should the Islamic Republic fall.
President Trump brokered the Abraham Accords, bringing peace between Arab nations and Israel. I see extending this idea to a free Iran through what we could call the Cyrus Accords.
Most critically, he has crossed a fundamental red line. Pahlavi has made explicit public appeals for the United States and Israeli regimes to militarily invade Iran, openly campaigning for a foreign war against the nation he claims as his homeland in the hope of being installed as its ruler. This has rendered him not merely irrelevant, but deeply despised, a treacherous aspirant to a foreign-imposed throne. Despite his profound and toxic lack of domestic support, Western and allied media persistently frame him as a legitimate opposition leader. This narrative is so artificially sustained that even Donald Trump, no subtle geopolitical analyst, has publicly questioned his actual support inside the country. The core operational logic of contemporary Western interference in Iran is hybrid warfare, the fusion of digital information warfare and physical violence into an interdependent system. Yet this model contains the seed of its own strategic failure. It is an engineered construct, fundamentally lacking the organic, sustainable momentum of a genuine mass movement. It manufactures a persuasive parallel reality online that remains decisively disconnected from the political and social facts on the ground. Within this framework, the armed element and the digital apparatus are two sides of the same foreign-minted coin. The armed element, reliant on Western-supported Kurdish separatists, Baluchi Takfiri terrorists, ISIS remnants, the MEK cult, and monarchist aspirants, creates tangible kinetic chaos, cross-border raids, infrastructure sabotage, and acts of terror designed to maximize societal fear and stretch state security to its limit. Simultaneously, the digital infrastructure and network of foreign-funded broadcast channels, troll farms, and algorithmically amplified influencers functions as the command and propaganda wing. Its mission is threefold: to incite domestic confusion, to weaponize every violent incident through layered misinformation, and to launder the image of discredited political proxies. The result is a closed self-referential media ecosystem, a hall of mirrors where the manufactured narrative itself becomes the primary battlefield. This machinery has constructed a potent parallel world in cyberspace, a digital theater where Iran is perpetually on the brink of collapse, where exiled figures command phantom legions, and where the state is portrayed as hollow and universally despised. Algorithms amplify and entrench this narrative, forging an echo chamber that can appear overwhelmingly dominant to external observers and segments of the diaspora. Yet herein lies its fundamental failures, its existential disconnection from material reality. On the ground, there is no collapse. The critical sustained mass, the nationwide popular support necessary to transmute digital noise into revolutionary change, is clearly absent. The movement lacks what is indispensable: deep-rooted, indigenous leadership and a coherent, unifying political platform that resonates with the Iranian mainstream. Instead, it is perceived precisely for what it is: a patchwork of foreign-backed separatists, reviled monarchists, and terrorist cults, elements whose very histories render them politically toxic. Consequently, these campaigns fail by design. They're not organic. They are the top-down imposition of a foreign geopolitical script onto a complex society. They make a fatal error, mistaking manufactured trending hashtags for genuine revolutionary capacity. The ultimate hypocrisy of the foreign-backed campaign against Iran is not its failure to spark a revolution. It is its cynical success in achieving its true objective, the collective punishment of the Iranian nation. While media figures and exiled proxies loudly champion the Iranian people, their actions are calibrated to achieve the precise opposite. By fueling a cycle of manufactured violence and algorithmically amplified rage, they manufacture the essential pretext for tightening the sanctions noose, a regime whose explicit goal is to strangle the economy and induce such widespread suffering that public desperation can be weaponized against the state itself. Thus, the very unrest that fails to create an internal uprising is digitally repackaged to justify intensified external assault. The self-proclaimed liberators are in practice the architects of a more brutal siege. In this way, even in their strategic failure, they succeed in their tactical cruelty, inflicting profound and sustained damage. The broadcast studio and the rifle stock serve the same foreign master with a single goal: not to empower a people, but to break their will and fracture their nation. Yet they have failed. They will always fail. See you next week.